Killing over 80 people and still living on the run, Carlos the Jackal became one of the most infamous criminals in the world. His reign of terror spanned several decades, with his criminal activities including bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations that caused worldwide fear and chaos. In my previous video, I covered everything about him in detail, from his early life to his rise within international terrorist organizations. If you haven't watched that video yet, I highly recommend doing so to understand the full context of his notoriety and know if he was right or wrong. With that being said, let's dive in and see how he got captured, faced justice, and what ultimately happened to him. After more than 2 years of searching for a place to stay, he finally found refuge in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. Before this, he had a brief stay in Jordan. In Khartoum, he was under the protection of Sheikh Hassan al-Turabi, who was a strong and influential Muslim leader. At this time, Sudan was also home to several other notorious figures. These include Imad Munia, who led operations for Hezbollah, Ayman al-Zawahiri, the leader of Egyptian Islamic Jihad, and Osama bin Laden, the head of al-Qaeda. So, what do you think led to Carlos the Jackal's downfall in such a haven for notorious individuals? The turning point came in 1993 when a daring mission unfolded, led by an experienced CIA contractor named Billy Waugh. With a storied past in military assistance command Vietnam, Billy was tasked with a high-stakes challenge to find the elusive Carlos the Jackal. So here's what happened. One day, Billy was off from work and decided to visit the vegetable market to buy groceries for the week. He went with a friend from the embassy, and since they were the only two white guys in Khartoum, they stood out. While browsing the market, Billy spotted someone he thought was Carlos the Jackal. When he pointed him out to his friend was skeptical, but Billy was convinced it was Carlos. They returned to the embassy, and Billy urgently told his colleague, Kofer, about his sighting. At first, Kofer didn't believe him, but Billy was persistent. Despite his age, he was in his late 60s or early 70s, Billy was determined and fit, having survived numerous injuries during his military career. For a month, Billy returned to the market daily, hoping to confirm his suspicion. Finally, they saw Carlos again. This time, they came up with a clever plan. They hired 2 Sudanese men to stage a fist fight at the market. Public fights are rare in Muslim cultures, so the commotion quickly gathered a crowd. Carlos, curious, craned his neck to watch the fight, giving Billy the perfect opportunity. He discreetly snapped photos of Carlos, capturing him on camera. Back at the embassy, they sent the images to CIA headquarters, where it was confirmed that the man was indeed Carlos the Jackal. Not only that, but Billy had also trailed Carlos back to his house, identifying his hideout. Now, here's when things took an unexpected turn. Carlos had a toothache and needed to see a dentist, so they came up with a clever plan. They arranged for a local dentist to invite Carlos for a regular checkup. During the visit, the dentist gave Carlos some gas, which made him fall asleep. When Carlos woke up, he found himself on a plane headed to France, captured and on his way to face justice. Then what? Once Carlos was on the plane to France, he faced the consequences of his past crimes. A French judge had already issued a national arrest warrant against him for murdering 2 policemen in Paris back in 1979. This warrant made it easier for the French government to bring him to justice without needing to ask Interpol for help. Carlos was charged with the murders of these 2 policemen, as well as Michel Mercarbel, who was once his accomplice. He was sent to the high-security Lassanti prison to wait for his trial. Although the French captured him from Sudan in a way that broke international rules, his appeal to be released based on this was turned down by the European Commission of Human Rights in 1996. The trial started on December 12, 1997. Carlos was in court, and he did not agree with how he was captured. He thought his arrest wasn't fair and wanted to be set free, but the court did not agree with him. At first, Carlos wasn't happy with his lawyers, and he ended up changing them a few times until he decided not to have any lawyers at all. When it was his turn to speak, Carlos denied that he was a part of the 1975 killings of 2 French agents and a man named Michel McCarville. Instead, he blamed the Mossad, which is the Secret Service of Israel, for those murders. Carlos also mentioned that for 30 years he had been involved in violent acts, but it was not because he wanted money. He said it was because he was fighting for a cause, to help free Palestine. He continued defending himself for the rest of his trial, even giving a long 4-hour speech at the end. The jury then took 3 hours and 48 minutes to decide. But guess what? On December 23rd, they found him guilty of all charges, and he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of getting out early. And don't think for a minute that this was it for Carlos. Later on, he faced more trials, which confirmed his original life sentence and added 2 more. In 2001, he became a Muslim and married his lawyer Isabel Coutant-Pere in a Muslim ceremony, even though he was still married to his second wife. While in prison in June 2003, Carlos wrote a book from his cell called Revolutionary Islam. This book talks about using violence as a way to fight social class conflicts. And in it, he supported Osama bin Laden and his attacks on the US. Then, in 2005, Carlos took his cause to the European Court of Human Rights, complaining that being in solitary confinement for so long was cruel and harsh treatment. The court looked at this claim in 2006 and decided that while his treatment didn't break the rules against cruel treatment, there was an issue, because Carlos didn't have a fair chance to complain and get help for his situation. Because of this, they said Carlos should get 10,000 euros to cover his costs, and later that year, he was moved from La Santa prison to Clairvaux prison. The Venezuelan president, Hugo Chavez, had quite an interesting connection with Carlos while Carlos was locked up in a prison in France. The story gets more interesting when he sends Carlos a letter. In it, he called Carlos a distinguished compatriot. This might make you wonder about their unusual friendship, but there's even more to the story. At an OPEC meeting in Caracas in 2006, Chavez went a step further and called Carlos his good friend. Fast forward to 2009, Chavez boldly defended Carlos, claiming he wasn't the villain everyone thought he was, and even said Carlos was a key player in the Palestine Liberation Organization's efforts. This statement stirred things up, prompting France to question Venezuela's ambassador for an explanation. Despite the diplomatic pressure, Chavez stood his ground and didn't take back his words. In 2017, Carlos made another surprising claim. He said he was responsible for 80 deaths, which added another layer to his already mysterious story. This admission showed how serious and dark his actions were in the past, and it highlighted his important, though unsettling, impact on the world. So, this is how Carlos the Jackal was arrested, punished, and became a notorious figure in global history. If you want to know more about him, make sure to watch my previous video. In that video, I covered everything about Carlos the Jackal in detail. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting historical content. One more thing, we love your support in the form of likes and subscriptions, but we would love it more if you could support us through supers. Thanks for watching.